You're tearing our family apart!
I already fixed it.
Why would a single night in a hotel turn into the moment my husband finally stopped believing me? How does a harmless mistake become the last piece of evidence he needed to act against me in public? Why did I think I was testing him when he was the one recording everything all along? Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Lysandra Vale, and I swear I never meant for one hotel night to blow up my entire life. People keep acting like I planned some grand betrayal, like I woke up that morning thinking, let me destroy my marriage before lunch. It wasn't like that. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. I was at a work conference, stressed, annoyed, feeling invisible in my own home. Milo was just a speaker, a stranger who paid attention for once. We talked too long, drank too much, and I crashed in his room because it felt easier than going back to my quiet, distant husband. Everyone keeps saying I cheated. I keep saying it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. A moment I needed to think clearly, whatever word makes me look less guilty. But honestly, I didn't think Rowan even cared anymore. He didn't get angry, didn't question, didn't fight for me. He just looked at me with that calm, unreadable face that made me feel like I was the dramatic one. I thought he was being passive. Turns out he was preparing, watching, waiting. And by the time I realized one night in a hotel wasn't harmless, he already had everything he needed. I woke up that morning convinced I was the only person in the world who understood how unfair my life had become. The room still smelled faintly like hotel soap, and for a second I forgot where I was. Then I saw the unfamiliar curtains, the stiff beige carpet, and Milo's jacket thrown over the chair. That was when the little jolt of panic hit me. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I knew Rowan would twist it into something it wasn't. He always did that. He took things too literally. He never understood context, or moods, or the way a moment could feel harmless in one light and complicated in another. Milo wasn't even in the room anymore. He had knocked softly at dawn, said he needed to prep for the morning session, and left before I could fully wake up. There had been no touching, no crossing the line. Just conversation, late-night room service, too much wine, and me falling asleep on the extra bed because I didn't feel like dealing with anyone. If anything, it was responsible. I could have driven home after drinking, and then Rowan would have had a bigger problem, but of course he'd act like the hotel was the end of the world. Still, I replayed the moment I'd accepted Milo's offer to walk me back to the room. I had been frustrated after the conference dinner, tired of Rowan's latest comments about how distracted I'd been lately. He said it so calmly, like he was diagnosing me. And being diagnosed by your own husband feels worse than being criticized. I wanted to feel seen by someone who didn't treat me like an equation. Milo was funny, relaxed, warm. When he said I looked overwhelmed and asked if I wanted to grab a drink upstairs instead of dealing with the noisy bar, I said yes, without really thinking. He didn't know I was married. I didn't correct him right away. That part was on me, maybe, but it didn't mean anything. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Rowan, a couple of texts that got shorter each time. Where are you? Then, are you okay? Then nothing. He always did that, start worried, end cold. I told myself he was probably sleeping now and I'd just explain everything later when he was calmer. He didn't like scenes, so I doubted he'd even ask many questions. He'd probably nod, make a tight-lipped face and say, "We'll talk tonight," like a disappointed manager. And then I'd have to spend the whole evening managing his mood. I hated mornings like that, where I felt like I had to rehearse my tone before I even saw him. That wasn't how marriage was supposed to feel. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I packed up quickly, washed my face, and caught a ride home still wearing the conference badge around my neck. I almost laughed thinking how ridiculous that must look. But honestly, The whole night felt like some heavy, ridiculous misunderstanding that would blow over once Rowan realized nothing happened. If he couldn't handle the idea of his wife having a life outside him, then maybe he needed to adjust, not me. When I walked into the kitchen, Seraphine was already there. She had let herself in again, which she always did when she sensed drama brewing. She sat on a stool eating cereal out of the box, grinning like she was waiting for a show. "There she is," she said, "Miss Conference Queen. You look rough." I rolled my eyes and dropped my bag. It was a long night. "Rowan said you weren't answering." "He said that?" She shrugged. "He looked stressed. He left for work early. Didn't even drink his whole coffee." She pointed at the mug in the sink like it was evidence. "Rowan never drank only half a cup. He was almost annoyingly structured about his habits." I tried not to sound defensive. "I was at the hotel. My phone died." Seraphine's eyebrows shot up. "The hotel? With who?" It wasn't like that. Which was the worst possible thing to say. It invited questions. It invited judgment. And Seraphine loved both. She leaned in, waiting. So I told the safe version first. I'd gotten overwhelmed. Milo walked me back. I crashed on the extra bed. Nothing happened. She listened, but her smirk told me she'd already invented a better, more dramatic story in her head. "So you spent the night in another man's room," she said. "Bold move." It wasn't a move. Rowan won't see it that way. You know how sensitive he is. I hated when she said that. Sensitive. Like he was fragile or dramatic. He wasn't. If anything, he was too calm. Too controlled. And that calmness made me feel like the villain every time something went wrong, even if the situation was completely understandable. "I'll talk to him tonight," I said, opening the fridge. Seraphine laughed softly. "You might want to talk to him sooner. He came home last night while I was here, heard me on the phone saying you ended up in some guy's room. He didn't say a word, just stood there." My stomach tightened. "Why were you even talking about that?" She shrugged. "You told me, and Mom was curious." Of course she was. Marianne always acted like Rowan was too serious for me, too cold, too responsible. She loved any story that made him look clueless or insecure. "What did Rowan do?" I asked. "Nothing. That's the weird part. He just said he was tired and went to bed. Didn't even argue." I hated that. Arguing at least meant caring. Silence felt like walls going up. Silence made me look like the only one who reacted emotionally. And when you're the only one reacting, you look guilty even when you aren't. I texted Rowan a quick, "We need to talk later. It's not what you think." He replied instantly, "Okay." Just that. One word. Seraphine peeked at my screen. "Oof. That's the Rowan I've already decided something voice." I snapped, "Can you not?" A little harsher than necessary, but I was tired. She held up both hands. "Fine. I'm just saying, he looked like someone who made up his mind last night." I didn't like hearing that. Rowan wasn't impulsive. He didn't make up his mind quickly about anything. He researched before choosing a toaster. He compared options before cancelling a subscription. He always needed information before acting. So what information did he think he had? I tried to shake it off. He'll understand once I explain it. Seraphine gave me a pitying look. Hope so. When she finally left, I went upstairs to change. That was when I noticed something strange on Rowan's nightstand. His phone screen lit up with a calendar reminder titled Riverside 3:40 p.m. Rowan never used reminders with such specific times unless it was work-related. His job was all about precise scheduling, ticket numbers, tiny details he somehow kept in perfect order. But a location-based reminder, outside work, that wasn't normal. I tapped the screen lightly, not enough to unlock it, just enough to read the preview. It disappeared instantly, like he'd cleared the notification recently. It made my chest tighten again, not with guilt, but with irritation. Was he planning something without telling me? Was this his new thing now, sneaking around because he didn't want to talk? He always accused me of being too emotional, but at least I didn't hide what I was thinking. I was upfront, honest in my own way. Downstairs, the coffee pot still sat half full, cold and untouched. He always finished it. Always. The house felt wrong. Too neat, too silent. Like something had been shifted a few inches to the left without anyone admitting it. By the time I sat on the couch, I had convinced myself Rowan owed me the apology. He had made assumptions. He had walked away. He had chosen silence. If he felt humiliated, that was on him for jumping to conclusions. I rehearsed the conversation in my head. I'd tell him nothing happened. I'd tell him I needed space last night because I'd been overwhelmed. I'd tell him that his distance lately pushed me into moments I wouldn't normally fall into. I'd tell him that if he wanted a perfect wife, he should act like a husband who notices things. I didn't feel guilty as I planned it. I felt justified. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning the kitchen, even though it wasn't dirty. It gave me something to do with my hands, something to control. Every time I thought about the hotel room, the wine, the conversation with Milo, I told myself there was nothing scandalous about any of it. People slept in hotel rooms all the time. People had co-workers they liked. People spent nights away when they needed space. Rowan was the one being dramatic, not me. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. She always texted with no punctuation, like every thought was part of the same breath. Heard about last night, don't let him guilt you. You didn't do anything wrong. He's too serious anyway. Come over later if he acts cold. I didn't reply. I appreciated her loyalty, but sometimes she made things sound worse. I went upstairs again to put away conference papers, and as I reached the landing, I caught sight of Rowan's side of the closet. His shoes were lined up perfectly. His work shirts were sorted by color. Nothing out of place, nothing missing. But the side of the bed where he slept, it was too smooth, like he hadn't slept there at all. I told myself I was imagining things. I had been tired. Maybe he left early. Maybe he didn't want to wake me, but the quiet that filled the house felt different. Heavy. Watching. For a second, I wondered if I'd pushed too far this time. Then I pushed that thought away just as quickly. I wasn't the one sneaking around with secret reminders and half-finished coffee cups. I stood at the window, arms crossed, staring at the driveway where his car had been hours earlier. My reflection looked more tired than guilty. I told myself that meant something. By the time afternoon sun lit the living room, I convinced myself I would walk into tonight's conversation with confidence, calm, clear. I'd explain my side, and he'd understand eventually. He always did. But that image of his phone screen, the disappearing reminder, the specific time, the strange location, sat at the back of my mind like a shadow that wouldn't leave. And even though I refused to admit it out loud, something inside me whispered that Rowan wasn't just hurt. He was preparing for something. The restaurant felt too bright the moment I walked in, like the lights were determined to expose every flaw in my face and every thought in my head. My friends had already taken a long table near the windows, the same spot we always claimed on Sundays. They were laughing about something when I approached, but the second they saw me, the laughter muted and shifted into that too eager tone people use when they smell drama. Cassidy waved me over with a grin. There she is, the woman of the hour. I forced a smile and slid into the booth between her and Talia. I still hadn't heard from Rowan since his single-word reply that morning. My chest felt tight, but I kept telling myself he always overreacted in silence. Quiet wasn't closure. Quiet wasn't final. Quiet was him waiting for me to explain things in a way he couldn't twist. I took a sip of water and tried to soothe the raw edge in my throat. What's going on? Talia leaned in. Seraphine said you had a wild night at the conference. Of course she did. I shouldn't have been surprised. That woman spread information the way some people spread butter on toast, messy, fast, and with no sense of limits. I kept my tone even. It wasn't wild, just long, I crashed in a colleague's room after we finished preparing for a panel. Cassidy raised a brow. Male colleague, right? I hated how she said it, like it was some flirtatious detail I owed them. It wasn't like that, I said. Nothing happened. Talia smirked. Does Rowan know that? Yes, I snapped before remembering I hadn't actually explained much to him yet. I softened my voice. I'm going to talk to him tonight. It'll be fine. But the way their eyes flicked toward each other made me realize something. They didn't believe me. Or worse, they liked not believing me. It made the brunch more interesting. Cassidy stirred her drink with exaggerated slowness. You know he came up on my For You page earlier. I blinked. What? She shrugged. Someone posted a clip from last month's charity event. You two were in the background. He looked miserable. He wasn't miserable, I said. He's just not one of those perform-for-the-camera husbands. Talia nodded sympathetically, in a way that irritated me. Maybe he's tired of feeling like he has to keep up. Keep up with what? I asked. She gave me a look that made my stomach twist. With you. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say Rowan never had to keep up with anything. That I was the one juggling my job, family expectations, and an increasingly distant husband. But the words refused to form. Instead, I took a long sip of my iced tea and let the cold sting my throat. I told myself none of this mattered. Rowan always returned to baseline eventually. He processed, he thought, he rationalized. It was part of what made him difficult sometimes, and predictable. I leaned on that predictability like a crutch, even if I didn't admit it aloud. The table descended into small talk until the waitress took our orders. For a moment, I thought things would settle. They didn't. Halfway through my salad, the door chimed and Talia gasped. Speak of the devil. I turned, expecting Rowan. My pulse sped up before I saw the truth. Seraphine strolled in, wearing oversized sunglasses and a dress too sparkly for noon. Great. She spotted us instantly and sauntered over like the star of a show no one auditioned for. Well, well, she said, sliding into an empty chair. Looks like someone survived a hotel getaway. Cassidy and Talia exchanged a look that made my spine stiffen. Seraphine, I warned. Not now. Oh, please, she said, waving a hand. We're among friends. She turned to the others. You should have seen Rowan's face last night. He looked like someone stole his lunch money. Heat rushed up my neck. Stop talking about him like that. She smirked. I'm just saying, if he wants a confident wife, he should be man enough to handle confidence. Talia hid a snort. Cassidy didn't bother. I felt the humiliation burn under my skin. They were laughing at him, at us, at me for choosing a man they decided wasn't strong enough. And somehow, I felt responsible for those laughs, even though none of this was my fault. He didn't even argue with her, Seraphine continued. Just stood there while I explained everything. I froze. You what? She shrugged, feigning innocence. Well, he asked why your phone was dead, so I told him you spent the night with Milo. You didn't. And that you were doing fine without him hovering. The room tilted slightly. Rowan hated humiliation more than anything. He avoided confrontations, avoided scenes, and she had handed him one on a silver platter while I wasn't even there. Cassidy murmured, He really didn't argue. Nope, Seraphine said. He didn't defend himself either. He just left. She paused dramatically. Honestly, it was kind of heartbreaking, in a pathetic way. The irritation exploded in my chest like a shaken soda can. He's not pathetic. Cassidy lifted a brow. Didn't sound very strong either. I gripped my fork so tightly it hurt. I don't need him to be strong. I need him to be stable. Talia smirked. Stable men don't walk out of rooms like that. I told you, Seraphine said, tapping her nail on the table. He made that face he makes when he's pretending everything's fine. You know, the one where his eyes look empty. My stomach twisted. I knew that look, the one he gave right before withdrawing into that calm, unreachable space. I hated how much they were enjoying this. The worst part was that I didn't know what Rowan was thinking. Silence was his strategy, his weapon, his way of controlling the narrative. And I had no idea where he stood right now. I checked my phone again, no messages from him. Cassidy leaned in. "So what's your plan? You going to spin it as a misunderstanding?" I swallowed hard. "It was a misunderstanding." Talia snorted. "Sure." I felt the urge to defend myself rise like a tide. I wanted to say they didn't know what it felt like to be overlooked, to feel like your husband stopped paying attention to you. They didn't know how heavy silence could feel, how lonely a marriage could get when the person across the table treated you like an obligation. But I didn't say any of that. I just kept eating, stabbing each piece of lettuce so hard the fork scraped the plate. A text pinged. Everyone looked up. My heart leapt. "Rowan?" But the screen said Mum. "Heard you upset Rowan. Don't let him guilt you. You did nothing wrong. He just gets jealous too easily. Come over later." I set the phone face down. I didn't need her stirring things up too. The food arrived, and the conversation moved to other topics, but every comment felt like it was circling back to Rowan. Talia said, "Honestly, if my husband ever walked away from me like that, I'd assume he was done." Cassidy added, "Or planning something." Seraphine smirked. "Rowan planning something? Please, he can barely plan a date night." The heat inside me spiked. "You're wrong." She shrugged. "Then where is he now?" I didn't have an answer. After paying the bill, we stepped outside. The sunlight felt harsher than before, glaring off the restaurant windows. As everyone said their goodbyes, Cassidy pulled me aside. "For what it's worth," she said, lowering her voice, "if you did cheat, you should just own it." "I didn't." She gave me a sympathetic look, which was worse than hostility. "Then I hope he believes you." Her tone made it clear she didn't. The ride home felt long, even though it was only 10 minutes. My thoughts looped endlessly. Rowan hearing Seraphine, Rowan leaving, Rowan being mocked by my friends like he wasn't even a person. I walked inside and dropped my keys on the counter. The house was still empty, still too neat, still wrong. On the dining table, I noticed a stack of papers, shifted slightly from where I'd placed them last week. Rowan never touched my things unless he had a reason. Next to the stack was a mug, his mug, cleaned and set upside down on the far corner of the counter, away from where mine usually sat. The placement looked deliberate, like he was drawing invisible borders inside our own home. I called his phone. No answer. The silence wrapped around me, thick and uncomfortable. It didn't feel like waiting anymore. It felt like distance calcifying into something heavier. I tried to distract myself by straightening the throw pillows and wiping down the already clean counter. But my mind kept replaying the restaurant scene, the laughter, the pity, the judgment, and Rowan's absence everywhere I looked. By late afternoon, my nerves were frayed. I checked the driveway every 5 minutes. I even walked to the window upstairs and scanned the street like a teenager watching for headlights. I wished I could pretend I didn't care, but I did. Not because of guilt, because I hated being out of control. I hated not knowing the terms of the conversation we would eventually have. Around 6, I heard footsteps outside. I rushed to the window. Not Rowan, a delivery driver. When I came downstairs again, I noticed something odd near the shoe rack. One of Rowan's work shoes was missing. Just one. The other pair sat neatly in place. Maybe he'd changed shoes earlier. Maybe I just hadn't paid attention. Maybe I was spiraling. I wandered into the living room and sat on the couch. For a long time, I stared at the blank TV screen, seeing nothing but reflections of a woman who didn't know what was coming next. The sun dipped behind the houses, and the living room filled with shadows. My phone buzzed once. A notification, not a message. I ignored it. I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to imagine what Rowan would say when he finally walked through the door. Would he be calm, cold, soft? None of those possibilities scared me as much as a fourth one. What if he didn't come home at all tonight? That thought landed in my chest like a stone, and for the first time since morning, a thin sliver of fear slid beneath my irritation. Rowan didn't come home that night. I kept waiting for the sound of the garage door, or his keys hitting the bowl by the entryway, or even just the familiar creak of his footsteps on the stairs. Nothing came. The silence felt heavier than the dark outside, pressing against my ears until even my own breathing annoyed me. At some point, I crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling for hours, telling myself it wasn't a big deal. People stayed out when they were upset. People cooled off. People took space. It didn't have to mean anything, but around 3 a.m, I opened his side of the closet again, just to make sure he hadn't taken anything. Everything looked normal. Shirts sorted, ties rolled up, belts hung neatly. The only difference was that his watch wasn't in the little tray he kept on the dresser. He always took it off before bed, placed it in the same spot. The empty tray made my stomach twist. I told myself he probably just wore it today. People wore watches. It wasn't a sign of abandonment, but I couldn't stop compulsively scanning the room for other missing pieces. No suitcase gone, no drawers empty, no clothes missing. So he hadn't actually left. He was just avoiding me. That should have made me angry. Instead, it made me feel something I didn't like admitting: unease. When the sun finally rose, I gave up on sleeping. My head throbbed from lack of rest and too many thoughts. I showered, dressed for work, applied makeup carefully enough to make myself look collected. I refused to walk into the office looking like someone who'd been crying, even though I hadn't shed a single tear. I wasn't sad, just tired, just irritated, just unsettled. On the drive to work, I kept checking my phone at red lights. Nothing. No message from him. No missed call. Even his read receipts were off, which meant he was ignoring everything, or he'd turned his phone on silent, or maybe he'd blocked notifications. I didn't know. Rowan wasn't extreme, but he was thorough. If he didn't want interruptions, he shut the world out completely. When I got into the office, everyone seemed more upbeat than usual. People were chatting near the coffee machine, catching up on weekend stories. I slipped into my chair and turned on my computer, trying to look like someone who had her life in order. My inbox was boring. Meeting reminders, project updates, a note from my supervisor about print materials for next month's conference. Nothing urgent. Then Milo walked by my desk. He gave me a quick smile. "Morning. You make it home okay yesterday?" There it was. Too casual, too innocent, too dangerous. A few co-workers nearby glanced up. Not many, but enough. I forced a polite smile. "Yeah, long night, but I got home fine." "That's good," he said. "Didn't see you at breakfast before checkout." "Had to rush," I replied. He nodded and walked off to another department meeting. But the damage was done. 2 junior employees were already whispering. I hated how easily they jumped to conclusions. If they had any idea what it felt like to be trapped between a distant husband and a moment of weakness, maybe they wouldn't judge so quickly. My phone buzzed, a notification from the conference's social media page. Someone had posted photos from last night's sessions. One picture showed me laughing with Milo at the rooftop bar, head tilted back, the city lights reflecting in the glass railing behind us. He'd been telling a story about a malfunctioning projector, but in the photo, it looked intimate. Too intimate. Someone in the comments wrote, "That chemistry, though." I stared at the screen until my chest felt tight. I wasn't going to panic over a stupid photo. Rowan knew how pictures could lie. He worked with data. He understood context. But the timing was awful, and the people around me were noticing. At lunch, I met my coworker Amaya at the cafe across the street. She was one of the few people at work I actually trusted. She slid into the booth across from me and gave me a look I didn't appreciate. "So," she said, "Twitter saw your picture." "I know," I muttered, stirring my drink. "It's nothing." "It doesn't look like nothing," she said. "You know how people talk." I rolled my eyes. People need something better to do. She hesitated before speaking again. Did Rowan see it? I swallowed. I don't know. You okay? Of course, I said quickly. Why wouldn't I be? Amaya lifted her brows. Liz, you look like someone who hasn't slept. I slept fine. She didn't push. She never did. That was why she was tolerable. I preferred people who didn't poke at the parts of my life I wasn't ready to explain. As we ate, I kept glancing at my phone, hoping for some sign from Rowan. A text, a missed call, anything. But the screen remained blank. Around 2, I finally broke and sent him a message. Where are you? No reply. I told myself he was in a meeting. But Rowan always stepped out to message me back, even if just to say he'd talk later. This silence wasn't normal. By 3, I'd worked myself into a state somewhere between anxious and furious. I kept hearing Seraphine's voice from yesterday. He didn't even defend himself. I hated that she might be right about anything. When work ended, I drove to the park a few blocks from our house. I didn't want to arrive home first. I didn't want to stand in an empty living room again. So I sat on a bench near the pond, watching kids feed ducks while the wind pushed ripples across the water. Then my phone buzzed. I grabbed it instantly. A message. But not from Rowan. It was from Marianne. Heard he's still mad, don't let him make you feel guilty, we all know how he is. I clenched my teeth. My mother always acted like Rowan was some fragile overthinker who couldn't handle real life. She loved painting herself as the wise, carefree woman who thought every man was too serious. But sometimes, her constant excuses made me feel worse, not better. I put the phone down and stared at the pond. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to sit in silence waiting for answers he wasn't giving me. I didn't want to admit that the longer his silence stretched, the more I felt something like fear crawling under my skin. I didn't want to admit that his calm scared me more than any shouting ever could. My phone buzzed again. Another notification from one of my social media accounts. Someone tagged me in a photo. It was the rooftop picture again, but zoomed in. My smile, Milo leaning close, the glow of city lights. It looked like an engagement photo, not a casual conversation. I wanted to throw my phone, but I didn't. I needed it. I needed Rowan to finally say something. Eventually, I got back into my car and drove home. The driveway was empty, the house dark. My chest tightened. I walked inside and flicked on the lights. The living room looked exactly as I left it. Too neat, too clean, too untouched by anyone except me. I set my keys down and listened. Nothing. Upstairs, our bedroom was empty. Rowan's pillow looked untouched, his watch tray still empty. Annoyance bubbled up again. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative by disappearing. If he had something to say, he should say it. I wasn't the villain here. I hadn't done anything irreversible. He was the one letting other people's gossip get to him. He was the one who stormed out. He was the one who refused to communicate. As I paced, something metallic caught my eye. A flash of silver near his dresser drawer. The corner of a USB drive sticking out from under a stack of notebooks. I picked it up. It was small and unlabeled, except for a date written in black marker. The date of the conference. I stared at it, my heartbeat quickening. Why label something with that date? What could possibly require that level of organization? Rowan wasn't messy, but he also wasn't obsessive. Unless he was upset, unless he was preparing something, unless he was cataloging. What are you doing? His voice behind me made me jump so hard I nearly dropped the USB. I spun around. He stood in the doorway, jacket still on, expression unreadable. Rowan, I breathed, where were you? He didn't answer. His gaze moved from my face to the USB in my hand. Put that back. The coldness in his tone startled me. I was just... Put it back. I placed it on the dresser slowly. My fingers felt stiff. He walked in, took the USB, slipped it into his bag. Every movement precise, controlled, like he'd rehearsed it. I forced a shaky laugh. You're being dramatic. He didn't react. We'll talk later. No, I said, stepping toward him. We'll talk now. You've been avoiding me all day. I wasn't avoiding you, he said calmly. I was busy. With what? A lot of things. His vagueness made my stomach twist. Why didn't you answer me? He looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes weren't angry. They were worse, flat, distant, impossible to read. Nothing I said would have changed anything. What does that mean? He didn't reply. He set his bag down, walked past me, and headed toward the guest room. I followed him. Rowan, stop. He kept walking. Not tonight. I didn't cheat, I said sharply. You know that, right? He paused in the hallway. Do I? The question cut deeper than any accusation. Yes, I snapped. You know me. You know I wouldn't. He turned his head slightly. I know a lot of things now. What is that supposed to mean? Another long, suffocating silence. Then he said, We'll talk when I'm ready. I felt my chest tighten. You can't just keep everything to yourself and expect me to guess how you feel. He looked at me finally, and the calm in his face terrified me more than any anger. I'm not asking you to guess anymore. And then he closed the door to the guest room, quietly, cleanly, with a finality that made my throat close. I stood in the hallway, frozen, listening to the soft click of the lock sliding into place. Not a slam, not a shout, just that tiny, deliberate click. I backed away slowly, breathing too fast, suddenly aware of how cold the house felt. I returned to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty watch tray. For the first time since this started, I felt something unfamiliar, something sharp and uncomfortable. Not guilt. Fear. The next morning felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. The air in the house was too still, almost staged, like someone had walked through and straightened everything while I slept. For a moment, I thought Rowan might have come back to our room during the night, maybe to check on me or to soften after whatever mood he'd been in. But when I reached across the mattress, his side was cold and undisturbed. The blanket was smooth from where he'd folded it down yesterday. I sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from my face. My chest still felt tight from the way he had spoken to me, calm, steady, unreadable. I hated that tone. When someone yells, you know where you stand. But when someone is quiet, when they measure their words, when they look at you like they're studying a puzzle they've already solved, that uncertainty stings more than anything. Downstairs, the kitchen lights were on. I heard a faint clink of ceramic. For a brief moment, a tiny, hopeful part of me imagined Rowan cooking breakfast like he used to on weekends. Pancakes, toast, eggs, something normal, something grounding. But when I reached the kitchen doorway, all he was doing was rinsing his mug and setting it upside down on the opposite end of the counter from mine, farther away than usual. He didn't look up when I walked in. Morning, I said, trying to sound casual. Morning. His voice was flat, not angry, not warm, just flat. I lingered near the fridge. You left early yesterday. I had things to do. What things? He turned off the faucet, dried his hands and said, errands. Always that same word. Meaningless, vague, impossible to interpret. I pushed gently, trying not to sound desperate. Rowan, can you at least tell me where you were? He finally looked at me, but his expression gave nothing away. It wouldn't change anything. That answer snapped something inside me. You're acting like I cheated on you, I blurted. You know I didn't. He dried his mug slowly, carefully, as if the entire world depended on that single task. I know what I saw, what I heard. You didn't see anything. He didn't respond. I followed him as he left the kitchen and walked toward the entryway. You're blowing one misunderstanding out of proportion. He put on his shoes. You can call it whatever you want. I'm calling it the truth, I said sharply. I fell asleep in a colleague's room. Nothing happened. Rowan didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse me. He simply said, "We'll talk when I get back." "When is that?" He opened the door. "Later." The door shut harder than he probably intended, but not hard enough to count as slamming. That bothered me more than a slam would have. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, swallowing down the burning in my chest. I wasn't going to let him make me feel small in my own house. He could be upset, sure, but he didn't get to act like I had destroyed something. Because I hadn't, and I wasn't going to let him pretend otherwise. Still, the emptiness in the house pressed on me again, heavier than yesterday. I checked my phone. No messages. By 10, I forced myself to go to the grocery store. I needed to get out of the house before I spiraled. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw someone I recognized, Eva, his mother, pushing a cart toward her car. Perfect. I considered turning around before she saw me, but she noticed me immediately. She paused, her expression unreadable. Unlike Rowan's silence, Eva's unreadable face always meant judgment. "Lysandra," she said as I approached. "Morning," I replied. "You're out early." I forced a smile. "Just picking up a few things." She nodded stiffly. "Rowan called me yesterday." My stomach squeezed. "Oh." He said he needed space. "Space from what?" I asked, trying to sound confused rather than guilty. "You should know," she said quietly. "He's hurt." "I didn't do anything." Her gaze hardened. "You humiliated him." The accusation cut sharper than expected. "I didn't." "He heard what your sister said, and he saw that photo." My heart thumped uncomfortably. He shouldn't have taken it seriously. People exaggerate online. "Do you think your marriage is a performance?" "That's not fair." "Neither was what you did," she said. "He deserved better." Anger flared. Maybe he deserved to hear how I've been feeling lately. Maybe if he didn't ignore me all the time. She lifted a hand. "Don't twist this. Rowan listens more than you realize." I opened my mouth to argue, but she shook her head and walked away before I could form the words. I stood there, trembling with a mix of fury and embarrassment. Why was everyone acting like I'd committed some unforgivable crime? Why did no one care about how I felt? Why was Rowan suddenly the victim in all of this? Inside the store, I wandered the aisles without really seeing anything. My mind kept circling back to Rowan's face, his tone, his silence, Eva's disapproval, and the stupid USB drive I'd found. I kept telling myself none of it mattered, that Rowan would cool off, that I could talk him down like always. But part of me sensed something different this time. His distance wasn't emotional. It was deliberate. When I got home, the living room looked untouched. As I set the groceries down, Jonah came down the stairs, rubbing his eyes. He looked small and tired. "Hey, bud," I said, softening my voice. "You hungry?" He nodded. "Where's Dad?" I swallowed. "He's out. He'll be home later." Jonah frowned. "Why are you and Dad mad?" I forced a smile. "We're not mad. Just talking through some things." "You slept in different rooms," he said quietly. I heard doors closing. My throat tightened. Adults just need space sometimes. It's not your problem. He nodded slowly, but the worry in his eyes lingered. I hated that. I hated that Rowan's dramatic silence was affecting our son. If Rowan had just stayed home last night, if he'd talked things through like an adult instead of disappearing, Jonah wouldn't be asking questions. This was his fault, not mine. After making Jonah a sandwich, I went upstairs to look for Rowan. Maybe he'd returned while I was out. Maybe he'd decided he was ready to talk. But the guest room door was still closed. I knocked lightly. "Rowan?" No response. I tried again. "Rowan, can you open the door? Please?" Nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. Hours crawled by. I cleaned, paced, checked my phone, stared out the window, repeated the cycle. Near 6, I heard the faint hum of something from upstairs. A soft, mechanical noise. A printer. The sound made my chest squeeze like a vice. I walked upstairs quietly. following the noise. It was coming from the guest room. I knocked again. "Rowan?" The hum stopped instantly. My pulse thudded. "Can we talk?" Silence. "Rowan, I'm trying here." Still nothing. I stared at the locked door, adrenaline rising. He wasn't avoiding me because he was hurt. He was avoiding me because he was doing something he didn't want me to see. I backed away slowly and found myself in the stairwell landing, gripping the railing until my knuckles whitened. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. Later that evening, around 9, I heard the door to the guest room unlock. I turned sharply. Rowan stepped out, carrying his laptop bag. He didn't look surprised to see me waiting. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Out." "When will you be back?" "When I'm done." I felt my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "Can you stop speaking in riddles for once and just tell me what's going on?" He looked at me with that same unreadable expression. "I'm handling things." "What things?" "Things that matter." My breath stuttered. "The marriage matters." "That's why I'm handling it," he said quietly. Panic flickered under my ribs. "You can't just decide things without me." "I'm not deciding alone," he said. "I'm responding." "What does that even mean?" He didn't answer. He brushed past me gently but firmly, as if I were furniture to navigate around rather than a person. The front door opened. "Rowan," I said sharply, "we're not done here." He paused in the doorway. "We will be soon." And then he left. Just like that. I stood frozen in the hallway long after the door closed, my entire body buzzing with disbelief. Rowan wasn't acting hurt. He wasn't acting angry. He was acting prepared. Too prepared. And I suddenly realized I wasn't part of whatever preparation he had been doing. Not even a little. Jonah's school pickup line always moved slowly, but that afternoon it felt frozen in place. Cars inched forward a few feet at a time, the sun glaring off windshields, parents checking phones, or staring ahead with blank after-work faces. I used to find the slow pace comforting, an excuse to sit still for a moment, but today my leg bounced so fast the entire car shook. I checked my phone again. Nothing from Rowan. He had left the night before with that same quiet finality, and hadn't returned, hadn't texted, hadn't even left a voicemail. I wasn't used to this level of silence. Rowan always communicated, even when upset. He didn't like open loops. He didn't like unanswered questions. His job revolved around clarity, reports, resolutions. So the fact that he was creating unanswered questions now meant something deliberately, and that deliberate part was what scared me. Finally, Jonah walked out with the rest of his class. He spotted me and waved, but his smile looked unsure. He climbed into the back seat, pulling his backpack onto his lap. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. He buckled his seatbelt without a word. I tried again. "Good day at school?" He shrugged. "We did a science thing." "What kind of science thing?" "Magnets." His voice was quiet. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Are you okay?" Another shrug. He looked out the window. "Dad usually picks me up on Thursdays." That hit like a punch to the ribs. "I know," I said carefully. "He's just busy today." "With what?" I hesitated. I hated that my child asked better questions than Rowan did these days. "Grown-up stuff," I said, hating myself for how weak it sounded. Jonah stared out the window again. "Did you and Dad fight?" "No," I said too quickly. "We just disagreed about something. Adults do that." He didn't answer. His silence made me feel 10 inches tall. I was suddenly aware that children see everything, feel everything, even if they can't explain it. His unease sat in the air like dust, impossible to ignore. When we got home, Jonah went upstairs to change, and I stood alone in the kitchen trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed. Finally. My heart jumped, but it was only Seraphine. "Heard he's still not home. You need to fix this before he makes you look bad. Call me ASAP." I didn't respond. Her version of help always caused more chaos, and I didn't need her adding gasoline to whatever fire was already burning. Instead, I paced around the kitchen island, staring at the blank space of counter where Rowan usually lined up his groceries. I hated how empty the house felt. His absence was louder than any argument could have been. I reached for my phone again and finally caved, texting him, "Can we please talk tonight? This can't keep going like this." He didn't reply. I typed again. "I need to explain everything. You'll understand if you just stop shutting me out." Still nothing. By the time I called, his phone rang twice and went straight to voicemail. "Rowan," I said, struggling to keep my voice controlled. "This is getting ridiculous. We can't solve anything if you won't talk to me. I'm home. Jonah's home. Please come back so we can settle this." I hung up before my voice cracked. After dinner, microwaved pasta Jonah barely touched, I sent him one last message. "If you don't come home tonight, at least tell me when we can talk." The 3 dots appeared and I froze. He was typing, then they disappeared. I paced the living room until my chest hurt, glancing out the window every few minutes. Around 9, headlights finally swept across the driveway. I rushed to the door before I could stop myself. Rowan stepped inside wearing his work clothes from earlier, not even loosened. His expression was calm, too calm, the way someone looks when they've already made up their mind about something. "Rowan," I said, breathless. "Finally." He closed the door gently, not sharply, not angrily, just controlled. "Where were you?" I asked. He removed his keys from his pocket, placing them on the counter in a straight line. "Out." I wanted to scream. "Doing what?" "Preparing." The word hit me with a chill. "Preparing for what?" I demanded. He paused, then answered in a tone so quiet it made my skin prickle. "For everything." That should have made sense, but it didn't, not fully. It sounded like a door closing, not opening. I stepped toward him. "I need you to stop talking in riddles and actually communicate." He looked at me then, eyes steady. "I am communicating." "No, you're shutting me out." "I'm creating space," he corrected. "For what?" I cried. "Punishment? Revenge?" "What, Rowan?" His expression didn't flicker. "For clarity." I let out a shaky breath. "I already told you nothing happened with Milo." "I know what you told me," he said, voice even. I hated how he said it, like my words were items he was logging in a system. "And I know what actually happened," he added. My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "Lysandra," he said, picking up his laptop bag from the floor, "I've been reviewing things, sorting them, understanding them." "Understanding what?" I snapped. He didn't hesitate. "You." The single word landed heavier than any accusation. "I'm not—" My voice broke. "This isn't fair." "Fair," he repeated softly. "You think any of this feels fair?" I swallowed. "Rowan, I need you. We're supposed to face things together." He shook his head gently. "I've tried together." "You're making assumptions based on gossip," I pushed. "Seraphine exaggerated. Those pictures online aren't accurate. I didn't cheat." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a breath, steady and measured. "I'm handling this properly," he said. That sentence made my stomach twist so violently I had to grip the counter. "What does that mean?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He brushed past me, moving toward the stairs. I followed, unable to stop myself. "You can't just walk away from this conversation." "I'm not walking away," he said. "I'm preparing." "For what?" I cried again, voice rising. "For the changes that are coming." My pulse hammered. "What changes?" "Rowan, please, you're scaring me." He turned slightly, meeting my eyes with that unbearable calm. "Then take that as your sign to reflect." "Reflect on what?" "Your choices." "My choices?" I laughed, sharp and defensive. "You're the one acting like a stranger." Rowan didn't react to the jab. "I'll talk to you when the time is right." He started up the stairs. I followed. You can't just disappear every day and expect me to sit here like nothing is happening. He stopped on the landing. I don't expect you to sit, he said softly. I expect you to think. I blinked, unsure how to interpret that. He continued, actions have consequences, and sometimes consequences need structure. Rowan, I'm handling it, he repeated. My voice cracked. Handling what? He looked at me one more time, eyes calm in a way that chilled me. Everything, he said again. Then he walked into the guest room and closed the door. This time, he didn't lock it loudly. The latch clicked softly, almost politely. That softness terrified me more. I went downstairs because I couldn't breathe in that hallway anymore. I paced the kitchen, the living room, back to the kitchen. I checked the front window twice. Nothing made sense. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Your sister said he's acting cold. Don't let him bully your feelings aren't crimes. He's being dramatic. I threw the phone onto the couch. The last thing I needed was Marianne feeding my confidence in the wrong direction again. Another hour passed, then 2. I tried to watch TV, but none of the noise registered. I kept replaying every moment of the past few days, trying to understand what Rowan had seen, what he had heard, what he thought he understood. The way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't argue. It was methodical, calculated, like someone assembling puzzle pieces into a picture he didn't intend to show me yet. I checked the hallway, light still under the guest room door. A faint shadow moved across it once, then disappeared. He was awake, working on something. I had never hated silence more. Hours later, I heard him descend the stairs. I jumped to my feet, heart racing. He was fully dressed, jacket on, keys in hand, laptop bag over his shoulder. Where are you going? I asked again, voice thinner this time. Out, he repeated. When will you be back? When it's time. Rowan, please. He paused at the door. Lysandra. I froze. I'm handling this properly, he said again. I don't know what that means, I whispered. You will. The door opened. Cold air swept in. He stepped outside. This time, he didn't look back. And as the door closed behind him, a sharp, cold truth settled into my chest like a stone. He wasn't preparing to fix the marriage. He was preparing for something else, something final, something I wasn't ready for. The elevator ride felt too slow, even though it climbed floors faster than my pulse could settle. I kept smoothing my hair with shaking hands, checking my reflection in the brushed metal walls. I didn't know why I was nervous. It was just a conversation. Rowan had finally texted this morning, meet me at the tower lobby at 10:15. No explanation, no emotion, no punctuation. Just that. I had stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Fine, we'll talk then. He didn't reply, but at least he'd set a time. That was more than what he'd given me all week. My stomach fluttered. The lobby of his office tower wasn't the place I expected him to choose. It was public. Too public. Maybe he wanted to avoid a scene. Maybe he wanted witnesses so I couldn't twist his words. I wasn't planning to twist anything. I only wanted us to reset, to step out of this strange fog and finally hear each other. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to the ground floor lobby. Bright marble, high ceilings, glass walls that let in sharp winter sunlight. People walked through with bags and coffee cups, their footsteps echoing. At first, I didn't see him. My heart lurched in panic, but then I spotted him near the seating area. Standing, waiting, calm as always, a knot loosened in my chest. He hadn't abandoned me completely. He wouldn't call me here just to end everything. There was still something left to fix. Rowan, I said, my voice small and breathless as I crossed the polished floor. He looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw softness in his eyes. But then the expression vanished, replaced with that same controlled calm he'd worn for days. I hated it. You came, he said. You asked me to, I replied, trying to sound steady. So, are we talking now? Finally, he didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured to a bench near the tall windows, as if he were asking me to sit. I didn't want to. Sitting made me feel like I was surrendering, but I did it anyway. He stood in front of me, his posture stiff, hands clasped. "This isn't a fight," he said quietly. "Good," I replied. "Because I don't want to fight. I want to talk like adults." He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "This isn't about talking either." That confused me. Then what is it about? Before he could answer, someone in a navy blazer approached. I didn't recognize them. They held a beige envelope in their hand. "Mrs. Vale?" they asked. My throat tightened. "Yes?" The person glanced at Rowan, who gave a small nod. Then they turned back to me. "I'm here to serve you." The lobby fell silent. It wasn't really silent, but everything else, the chatter, the footsteps, the beeping of the security scanners, faded under the roar of blood in my ears. "What?" I whispered. They placed the envelope into my hands. My fingers curled around it before I could think. The paper felt heavy, like it was loaded with something sharp. "Service completed," the person said calmly before stepping away. I looked up at Rowan, blinking hard as the edges of my vision blurred. "What is this?" "Open it," he said. "No." My voice shook. "Tell me what this is first." He didn't raise his voice, didn't shift, didn't flinch. "It's what I've been preparing." With trembling hands, I slid a finger under the seal and pulled. Inside was a stack of papers, thick, official, filled with lines and boxes and printed names. My name. His name. At the top, a title stared back at me. Petition for legal separation, temporary custody and financial orders. The words punched the breath out of my lungs. "No," I murmured, shaking my head. "No, Rowan. This is too much. This is a mistake." "It's not a mistake," he said softly. "You can't be serious." My heartbeat rattled painfully in my chest. "Rowan, we have a son. We have a marriage. You can't just—" "I didn't just anything," he said, and there was steel under his calm now. "I've been preparing this for days. I consulted people. I organized everything. I kept records. I set timelines." My skin prickled. "Timelines? Records? Are you kidding me?" "No," he replied. "I documented everything I needed to." I felt the room tilt. "You think I cheated? That's what this is." "I know what you did," he said, not angrily, not loudly, just firmly. "I didn't sleep with him," I protested, voice cracking. "That isn't the only form of betrayal," he said. I opened my mouth, desperate for some argument, any argument, that could undo the spiral he had created. "Rowan, please. This isn't fair. You're judging everything based on gossip and screenshots and—" "Not just gossip," he interrupted. "Not just screenshots." "What then?" I demanded. He exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. I collected the truth. My entire body went rigid. "The truth?" I echoed. "What truth?" He reached into his bag and pulled out a single USB drive, the same one I'd seen earlier, the one with the date marked on it. He held it between two fingers, letting it catch the harsh lobby light. My stomach dropped. "What's on that?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. "Rowan," I said, panic rising, "you can't use things without context. You don't know how things looked. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said, "better than you think." "You're ruining everything over one mistake," I shot back. "One night that meant nothing." He studied me, his expression heartbreaking in its steadiness. "Then why didn't you tell me you were in his room?" "Because you would have judged me," I shouted. He didn't blink. "I judged you anyway. Keeping secrets didn't protect you." My breath hitched. I felt exposed, cornered, like every wall I had leaned on had quietly collapsed without warning. "What are you going to do with that?" I asked, nodding toward the USB. "What needs to be done?" he said simply. Cold spread down my spine. "Rowan, stop this, please. We can work through things. We've worked through worse. No, he said. We haven't. His certainty scared me more than anything else. I tried again. Jonah needs us together. Jonah needs stability, he said. He needs structure. He needs truth. My voice softened without my permission. He needs his parents. He'll still have them, Rowan said. Just not like this. Tears pressed at the edges of my eyes. You're tearing our family apart. You tore it when you stepped into that room, he said quietly. That hit harder than any slap could have. I shook my head, voice trembling. Rowan, you're misinterpreting. No, he replied. I'm done interpreting. I'm done hoping. I'm done being the quiet one while you rewrite everything to protect your version. My heart lurched. Rowan, I told you I was handling this properly, he said, and now I am. I looked down at the papers again. My name stared back at me like a stranger. Beneath it, bold print outlined temporary custody arrangements, Jonah spending weekdays with Rowan, weekends with me until everything was finalized. Another section addressed financial responsibility, living arrangements during the separation, and restrictions about introducing new individuals into Jonah's environment. It wasn't just a threat. It was a structure, a plan, a world he had built without me. Rowan, I whispered, my throat burning, you blindsided me. You blindsided me first. I shook my head violently. This is too far. You're overreacting. You're letting other people's opinions control you. No, he corrected. I'm preventing your choices from controlling me. I swallowed, struggling to breathe. This isn't you. You're not cold. You're not cruel. He looked away for a moment, jaw tightening ever so slightly. I learned from you. The words hit like a blade. My breath stuttered. Please, I whispered, the word catching. Don't do this out here. People are watching. They should, he said quietly. You never minded an audience before. Humiliation surged through me, raw and scalding. I hadn't realized until that moment how many people had stopped walking, how many eyes flicked toward us, how many steps slowed as if drawn into this moment by gravity. I felt myself shrinking, heat burning across my face. I didn't think, I murmured. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I know, he said. Something inside me loosened. Then he added, You didn't have to try. My breath broke. Rowan, I love you, I said desperately. Silence, the kind that cuts. I don't want this to happen, I continued, wiping my cheek. You're still my husband. He shook his head slowly. No, husband implies trust. Partnership. He paused. It implies truth. The last word landed with brutal clarity. I swallowed hard. So that's it? You're ending everything right here, in public? His eyes softened, but not the way I wanted. It was pity, not love. I'm ending the pretending, he said. My pulse roared in my ears. We can fix this. He shook his head again. No, I already fixed it. The words sank deep, chilling. I put everything in writing, he added. Everything is accounted for. The next steps start today. My throat tightened painfully. Rowan, don't do this. I already did, he said. And that was it. No explosion, no dramatic speeches, no yelling. Just Rowan standing in a sunlit lobby, handing me the end of our marriage in a clean envelope while strangers watched. I stared at the papers in my hands, the bold print blurring as tears finally overflowed. For the first time in days, he looked away, not out of anger, not out of guilt, but out of something that looked like acceptance. He stepped back. Goodbye, Lysandra. My breath caught. Rowan, wait. But he had already turned, already walked toward the exit, already disappearing into the bright winter morning beyond the glass doors. People around me shifted, their faces blurring in my vision as the lobby hummed back to life. Conversations resumed. Footsteps echoed. Phones buzzed. Life moved forward. Only I remained frozen. Holding the paperwork that officially documented the moment, my husband stopped giving me the benefit of doubt and started protecting himself from me. I stood there trembling, envelope crushed in my hands, as the bright light outside swallowed the last glimpse of him. And there was nothing left to say.